Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my Phantom Thoughts. Welcome back to Phantom Thoughts, a podcast about RPGs that, after a almost month-long hiatus, is in danger of challenging Joe Richter's Hindsightless podcast for the title of Most Sporadic Podcast in RPGs. In this episode, I have a couple of short ponders coming from play of my solo AD&D campaign, and of course, a little action from that campaign itself. So let's get to it. One thing I always think about in my head is a phrase that always occurs to me from time to time is the dice speaking. And sometimes it seems they're traveling a pathway that's obvious, and sometimes it seems like they're giving hints, and sometimes it just seems utter randomness. As I've been filling out the world, documenting other things going on besides just the adventures of the dragon slayers as they try to explore their new home and protect the treasure that they wrought from killing the red dragon oh so long ago. There's a place on the map of the world where, beside a large depression, there is an abandoned shrine. And in the movement through this area of humanoids and what the original Battlestar Galactica series intro team themed once, tribes of humans, the dice have led to one path almost entirely unseen and another rarely followed, or potentially one that has rarely been followed. And those two things are two things that have not really been in this campaign, and that is goblins and undead. The only mention of goblins we've had in the campaign to this point is a couple of nilbogs who showed up at the River Keep. And the only mention of undead we've had is one small short encounter with a handful of skeletons by the dragon slayers in their new keep of their own. But other than that, there's been nada. Some hobgoblins, some gnolls, lots of orcs. But the first group, tribe, whatever you want to call them, that has arrived at this shrine, abandoned shrine on the edge of a depression, is a large band of goblins. So our first of the campaign. And soon thereafter will arrive at the shrine a group of men. One of the many varieties of men mentioned in the Monster Manual. I won't go into details now. It doesn't really matter which variety it is. But what does matter in setting up for this, as I usually do, I will roll up treasure to determine if there's anything that is useful to the creatures in any potential upcoming battle. And of course, for men, their higher level parts of their tribe, their group, their team have the potential for magic weapons of their own beyond the treasure that goes with them. One thing I've done a little of, I did it with one set of gnolls. I thought I would do it with the goblins since their later arrivals, which would potentially mean they came from further away, is sometimes pulling something in from the Oriental Adventures Handbook from first edition AD&D. Usually it's weapons. In this case, I tried to roll up some magic items. And what I rolled up was a katana of disruption. Because in Oriental Adventures, disruption, the magical property of disruption, which is particularly effective against undead, can be more than just the mace of disruption that you see in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Handbook magic item. But lo and behold, also amongst the treasure, rolling up for regular treasure on the regular AD&D, well, really Oriental Adventure, not Oriental Adventures, Unearthed Arcana, which I've been using predominantly to roll up magic items. I came up with the group of men having a Mace of Disruption, a Sunblade, which has a +2 bonus, +4 versus evil, and 2 times damage versus creatures that are from or utilize the negative plane, which includes a lot of undead, and also an amulet versus undead. So 4 items that are either for or particularly effective against undead just showing up in the same place in a shrine, which is sort of a holy type place, in 2 different groups. What does that mean? Is it a shrine to some undead god? Is one or both of these groups going to the shrine to use it to advance the cause of a god of undeath, or to somehow encounter a group of undead? Only time and probably the dice will tell, but I am listening. Something that has caught my attention going through AD&D is the employment of rods, staffs, and wands. All the different sized magical sticks. And how in the description it talks about they start off with a certain number of charges, and some of them can be recharged and some of them can't. And it never goes into detail as to exactly how you recharge them. It's interesting that most of the rods can't be recharged. It says in all the descriptions, can't be just recharged, can't be recharged. I think in the DMG, only one of them can be recharged. And most of your staves and wands can be. It's a rare staff or wand that can't be recharged. Although there are staves, there's one staff that can only be recharged by absorbing spells, the Staff of the Magi, by absorbing spells. And most of your wands can be recharged. I think there's only one wand that can't be recharged. But it doesn't mention how. Now, for some of the wands and staves where they have the same effect as certain magical spells, then it makes sense that those spells would recharge those wands and staves. Although you wonder how high a level you have to be to cast it, because these magical sticks, to continue using the phrase, they cast at a pretty high level, with staves doing so at 8th level and wands doing so at 6th level. Now, they may not sound high, but it's actually a pretty high level to get to. I mean, you're at 8th level, you're getting just below name level, and 6th level, you're more than halfway there. So, you have to wonder if a lower level magic user should come across one of these, would they be able to recharge a wand if they were, say, 5th level instead of 6th level, or a staff if they were 6th or 7th level instead of 8th level? And then there are some of these functions that don't really correspond with any kind of spell, at least not exactly, and you wonder, how does recharging that work? Now, some of them you can kind of equate. For example, the Rod of Beguiling, which is the only one that's mentioned in the DMG that can be recharged, basically it is having the same effect as a light charm spell or the friend spell, for example. But something like the Wand of Enemy Detection or the Wand of Metal and Mineral Detection, those kind of things, there's not really anything specific about them. So it's interesting to see, if these magic items are introduced into the hands of lower level adventurers, do they just become essentially long-term consumables, where a potion or a scroll, you use it, it's used up. With this, you have the potential of recharging, but you may not have the ability to recharge, or it may be difficult to recharge it, on a regular basis, because obviously if you're adventuring, you're using your spell slots during the adventure. You're planning to use those spell slots during the adventure. So it'll only be in downtime between adventures that you could recharge it. If you had multiple wands, multiple staves, then it'd probably be very difficult to keep them charged at a high level before you went on your next adventure. unless you were foregoing adventuring for a long period of time. Now, theoretically, I guess you could do it in something like during the time you're training, but I do believe that the training rules do state that you need to be training pretty much that entire time. You need to be devoting yourself to that training to advance to the next level. So I don't know if that would be, yeah, you consider it kind of part of the training, recharging your wands and whatever you're learning to use your spells or what have you. But you could also say, no, you're training to learn the next level of magic. So you don't have time to simply be memorizing spells and expending them just to recharge your wands and staves and such. And of course, you could always have it be something more esoteric. You have to bathe it in the secretions of the gland of the firefly, and then expose it to the light of a full moon when it is at its peak, or some such thing, to charge it up, if you wanted to do it that way. And certainly in the spell research, magic item creation part of the DMG, it encourages that kind of more esoteric idea. And of course, the very idea of the way spells work in AD&D, that you're using the material components to tap into energy from other planes to bring it in, all that could factor into trying to recharge these magic items. That was just something that caught my imagination in this last little while, and something I thought I'd talk about here. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on recharging. Is it simply just finding the right spell and taking your time and casting it and memorizing and casting over and over again during downtime, or is there something else you do to help charge it up a quarter of the way, halfway, fully, what have you? What do you think? And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. The Womp Rats are a hobgoblin tribe living in a cave complex about a day's journey from the Dragon Cave. One of their patrols has run across a nest of griffins, a griffin lair, and stirred up the griffins, who have chased them to their compound. Initially, the hobgoblins, along with the orcs that had joined them from the remnants of the vile curly tails that had attacked the party at their keep, tried to deal with the griffins in the open. As the griffins flew through using fangs and talons to slowly rip them to shreds, they decided to retreat to the caves and place their guardian carnivorous apes at the entrance. The griffins had a very hostile reaction on the reaction table, so they were in essentially a blood rage, which is why I posited that there was a raid on their lair. The carnivorous apes were able to do a fair amount of damage to some of them, since they weren't able to use their flight or their numbers to an advantage against them. But eventually, they worked their way through the apes and then were confronted with the orcs. Now, the orcs had a variety of weapons, including some pole arms and some spears, which enabled them to operate several rows deep against just a couple of griffins in the cave passageways. But of course, being of simply one hit die against larger hit die creatures, they needed those numbers to try to get some hits in. But again, the griffins were getting the better of the orcs, and eventually the orcs' morale broke and they retreated, leaving the hobgoblins themselves to defend their lair. The hobgoblins adapted much the same tactics as the orcs, picking up pikes from fallen orcs and spears, and operating, again, 3 rows deep against the griffins. The griffins fell but continued advancing, and just before it got to the point where the hobgoblins were going to have to make a check, one that they probably would pretty assuredly have broken on. The final griffins fell. In the end, the griffins recovered from the hobgoblins recovered from the griffin corpses a magical battle axe and a magical ring. Finding the battle axe lodged in one of the griffins, partially healed over, and the ring simply trapped within some matted part of the griffin's fur. When all was said and done, they had killed a dozen griffins, but at the cost of all 8 of their carnivorous apes, 27 orcs, and 31 hobgoblins. They were also able to return to the griffin lair and recover 6 valuable eggs as well as 6 fledglings. These would get a good price in the market, or they could try raising them and riding them. What will they do? Only time will tell. The opening theme of this podcast was Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you have any thoughts or feedback, you can get in touch with me by leaving me a voice message on my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. That's 864-209-1441. Or through SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. That's www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. Or you can send me a message or an audio file on Discord, where I can be found the Pink Phantom, or through email, phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. That's phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. I don't have to play or read your feedback on the podcast if that is not your preference. Just let me know.